Sunglasses. I didn't send out notes because I was waiting for these slides because I wasn't sure.
You ready? Okay. This is the October 9th meeting of the get-together, since we can't have a meeting, since we don't have a quorum, of the Town of Chesapeake Beach Planning and Zoning Commission. Since we don't have a commission or don't have a quorum, we can't take any action on any items. But it's been suggested that Councilman Jaworski provide information to us as to what the town council is contemplating on doing with the sewer and the water and sewer draft manual. Councilman, if you want to tell us what's going on, that's great.
Sure. Well, thank you, and I apologize for bringing you all out here tonight since this is not a formal meeting of yours, but thanks for coming.
Okay.
I'd like to give you a little bit of background of what has gone behind the document you have in front of you. So we started this effort about 2.5 years ago. It was realized that no one was exactly sure when the last time was that the water and sewer manual was updated, a long time ago. So we decided to undertake that update, and we had a core working group that consisted of Holly, Connie, Jay, and Paul. That was our core group. We had input from Chris. Alyssa obviously provided some input along the way. John Castro at the plant has looked at it and gave us some comments on that. And of course, Mayor Mahoney's been involved, and several of the council members have also provided input along the way. So it's been a long road along the way. Basically, what has been done here is a major reformatting of the water and sewer manual. We've added a table of contents. I've checked the references to appendices because what we discovered in the old manual is one section would refer to Appendix A. Later on, the same appendix was being referenced but was called Appendix C, just because over the years people had tinkered with it and didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it. So we fixed all that. Added page numbers, cleaned up a lot of typos and formatting throughout the manual. That's the easy stuff. Significant changes in no particular order. One of the things is we updated several definitions, changed or updated some terminology. For example, the old manual referred to our facility over here as a POTW, publicly owned treatment works, which indeed was the term that was used for decades. When I did my professional work, that's what they were called. Now we call them water reclamation treatment plants. And if you remember when we upgraded that plant, we did a dedication ceremony, and indeed it's now called the WRTP. So we changed that definition. Two major things that I wanted to bring to your attention. One was we had an extensive discussion of capital contribution charges, and you find that in section 1.10. I'm sorry. Yeah, 1.10, which is on page 17. Under sewer and water connection fees, item the last paragraph of that section, just before section 111. So what's a capital contribution charge? That is a charge that a property owner, when they're applying for a permit to connect, would pay to the town. It is intended to offset some of the, quote, capital charges associated with the town providing adequate public water and sewer systems. What we realized is the way it had been working in the past is someone could have applied for a permit for whatever and paid a capital contribution charge a decade ago. As you all know, we've made significant upgrades to our system over the years, including the most recent upgrade of the water reclamation treatment plant, where nowadays the capital contribution charges are indeed higher, as they should be to offset the capital costs. And what we discussed was, well, is it really fair for someone to sit on this, quote, allowance for, say, a decade, and then come in and ask for a permit to actually build their home or whatever it was? We discussed at one point, if you did not apply for a permit within a set period of time, your capital contribution charge would have been refunded to you. We realized that that wasn't a good idea for a whole bunch of reasons, particularly in terms of residential properties where people may have had the property for generations. What is now in here is basically what it says is, okay, when you come in to apply for your permit, the town will review the capital contribution charge and determine whether or not an increase is warranted. So if you had this reserve capital contribution charge for 10 years, and nowadays, if you came in and asked for it to be 15% higher, you will be asked to pay that increased capital contribution charge to offset the improvements that the town has made since you first indicated an interest. So that's one of the most significant changes that's in there.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
You say the town will determine who, how, what entity.
What we did in the
town.
definitions, Larry, is the town is defined basically as the town administrator. The town administrator will determine who it is within staff that should be involved in that review. Chris, Jay, Paul, whoever.
Mm-hmm.
But the town is that one person, and they will then delegate to the appropriate person the actual task of reviewing it.
If the individual objects or the company, is there an appeal process?
There is. And I'm coming to the next part, which sort of applies to this too. We have now added in a new appendix that's a hardship exemption form. That's going to apply to a lot of things. It could apply to this capital contribution charge. Say you came back in, you have a small property down here south of town, and the town determines that the capital contribution charge is increased. Again, I'll use the theoretical 15%. And you have a hard time paying that. You can use this appendix now in the hardship exemption form to lay out your case as to why that would be a hardship to you. And that same form, I'll jump ahead here for a little bit, is going to apply to things like if you can't pay your quarterly water and sewer bill for whatever reason. You can use that same form, hardship exemption form, to ask for, I don't want to say a waiver, but a delay in paying that fee.
So if I understand it correctly, someone buys a piece of property, they pay the connection fee but never hook up. And then 20 years later, they decide they want to hook up. In the past, that's been valid, and they've been able to hook up it without a connection fee. What we're saying now is that it will be reassessed at the time that they intend to connect to see what the appropriate charge would be.
The only slight correction I would make in that is if they had paid it in the past, they would not have been hit with an increase in that fee. They would have paid the fee a long time ago. It's just they would never have had to pay an increase, even if they came back. And let's say, for example, 10 years ago, they put in for capital contribution charge for a single family residence. 10 years later, they come back and say, you know what, I've decided I'm going to put a 4-unit rental facility on the property. Under the old manual, there was no basis for the town to recommend an increase in the CCC. Now we can. Okay, does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
I just
Yes,
following
please.
that, I'm
Yeah.
wearing my lawyer's hat for a second. When it seems to me that the town might be opening itself up for some sort of arbitrary and capricious claim. If the town administrator on day one says property owner A gets a 10% bump on theirs, town administrator or its designee changes on day number 2, a property owner comes in similarly situated, and that designee says, all right, rather than a 10% bump, it's a 25% bump. Is there any way to prevent the town from being hard sued, whatever, with the concept of saying one is arbitrary and capricious?
I'm not in a position to answer that question. That would have to be an Alyssa question. And I don't know,
Right.
Chris,
It seems to me that we need to, the town needs to be careful on that and needs to get some sort of guidelines saying, how does the designee or the town administrator determine the amount of the bump, just so you don't get disparate bumps between two similarly situated individuals.
understand. I guess from my former engineer perspective, I thought it would be fairly straightforward as to what facility, let's use that 10-year time frame again.
Yeah.
What facilities were in place 10 years ago? What facilities are in place when you come in to ask for your permit today? And what has caused the increase in the capital contribution charge? That can be documented and say, okay, since you first applied for it, we've expanded the plant, we've extended pump stations, we've upgraded systems, and that's why the capital contribution charges go up. I agree, it needs to be a document that seems...
Right. It seems to me that your designee could say your capital improvements cost X amount of dollars in that interim.
Yep.
And they use a hard number cost for that. But your new designee says, all right, we're going to, rather than using the hard number, we're going to use a depreciated value number.
Right.
So you could get differences like that.
That'd be a good question for Alyssa to answer.
Yeah. I just wanted to raise that as a potential issue.
The other...
I guess the follow-on to that is that the connection fee is unrelated to what it actually costs the town to connect to the sewer system. It's based on other factors.
Correct. It's basically available facilities to handle what would be given to you in the way of public water or handled in the way of public sewer. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The other major thing I wanted to point out to you, and this caused us a lot of discussion. Chris was involved in a lot of this too. Centers around its paragraph. Well, it's two different paragraphs. One under the water system, paragraph 2.1, and one under the sewer, paragraph 7.3. Both of them are for the same thing, stating when you have to connect if public water and sewer becomes available to your property. What you'll see in here right now, it says all unconnected properties within 200 feet of public water, and back under the sewer system, it says 200 feet adjacent to the public sewer. Why is that? There's several reasons. One, starting from the baseline, the town really ought not to be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars extending public water and sewer into new areas unless there is a compelling public health reason for on-site wells or a compelling environmental reason for failing septic tanks. So with that basis saying we ought not to be spending this money unless there's a reason to do it, if we as the town do that, then you as a owner should connect to offset that compelling reason. From an engineering point of view, there's other reasons as well. When one designs these systems, you are assuming a certain number of users. So on the water supply side, you're saying, okay, there's going to be this number of residents that are going to need public water, and that's what the flow is going to be in the system. On the public sewer side, you're assuming, okay, there's going to be this number of houses connected, and we estimate these are the flows that are coming through the sewer system. If we don't have that, on the public water supply side, we run a risk of the water in the pipe becoming stagnant because it's just not flowing as much as was envisioned when it was designed. On the public sewer side, if we don't have those same flows coming down the pipe, we don't have the flows necessary to carry things down the pipe away. Get stagnant, we get deposition, and potentially we get odors. Now, I know this is potentially a controversial issue in terms of compelling people to connect. So this is also where that new appendix, the hardship exemption form, is going to come into play. So what the paragraph says is within 200 feet, you have 6 months basically to make connection. If you can't do that or you have a compelling reason not to, submit the hardship exemption form. For example, I'm a homeowner, Old Bayside Road. I just spent $50,000 putting in a state-of-the-art septic system, and the town comes through and puts in a public sewer system. Well, that's I just spent a whole bunch of money. Why should I be compelled? You can fill out the hardship exemption form, make your case, and it will be reviewed by the town and possibly given an exemption from connecting for some period of time. Questions?
How many septic systems do you have?
We have no idea because you know why? The town doesn't control those, the county does.
So the statement, it shall be unlawful to maintain unless otherwise approved by the town. So there could be a large number of individuals, have septic systems that are not approved by the town, and therefore it would be unlawful for them to continue with the septic system unless they apply for septic.
What I would point out is in the very next paragraph that you just point out, 7.6, we've inserted a sentence in there saying the property owner shall submit biannual reports to the Calvert County Health Department documenting that the septic system is being properly operated and maintained. These reports shall be signed by a master plumber. That was not in the previous manual. We had no knowledge of what was going on with septic systems. We're putting that in there. It goes to the county because the county is technically the entity that controls the septic tanks. We're hoping the county will sort of share that information with us going forward. Larry,
Well, back to the previous one, there still has to be approval by the town.
yes. Well, it's a two-step process. One would be for you to connect. If you have a septic system, why are you connecting to the public sewer? I know. I'm just saying. That would be my first question. If you're connecting to the public sewer system because your leach field, a septic tank, the flow comes into this tank and miraculous things happen in this tank, and then it flows out into this leach field. If you want to connect to the public sewer because your leach field is failing, you've got a failing septic system.
All right.
So that would then start to fall under this biannual inspection thing as to, if they want to connect, first of all, the question is why? And then second is biannually, you have to make sure these things are working right. If your leach field is failing and you're not aware of it, this biannual inspection will help turn that up.
Just assuming all of them are working fine, the septic systems that we have, but we don't have a record of who all these systems are. Is there a mechanism for them to go to apply for town approval for having a septic system?
Yes. There is an appendix, you'll see. Appendix B is application for water and sewer service. So you as the property owner would fill that out and submit it to the town if you wanted to connect to the public sewer.
But they aren't connecting, they're staying with their septic system.
Then we've got, other than asking for these biannual reports to make sure that it's being properly operated and maintained, town has no jurisdiction over it.
So by submitting your report, you would therefore earn approval of the town? Because that's what the sentence says, is it's unlawful to maintain one of these systems within the town unless otherwise approved by the town. And what's the mechanism for approval by the town so that they are then lawful?
So that would probably be a couple-step process. So you're building a home in an area where there is no public water and sewer.
I'm talking about existing homes that have existing septic systems.
Well, I think it's a two-step
Okay.
process.
Sorry.
paragraph 7.5 would apply to areas where there is no public sewer. You want to build a house, you want to put a septic in, and most likely have to have a private well as well. That's section 7.5. You're going to need the approval of the town to do that.
So that would be part of the building permit,
Yes.
maybe?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, systems in there, and in order to make sure we as the town have some idea that it's being properly operated and maintained, that's section 7.6. This biannual report requirement.
So everyone that has an operating system that meets the standards of the county is grandfathered to have approval by the town.
Yes, but when this takes effect, we are going to be requiring them to submit the biannual reports.
Okay.
Just to help make sure they keep them up.
Is the county aware that they're going to be receiving these reports, and have we coordinated some sort of system?
We've had a couple, I'll describe casual discussions with them where they've sort of indicated, oh, that'd be interesting. So we're hoping to work out those details with them. What we're trying to do is sort of point out that it's not just us as Chesapeake Beach. It's really, well, North Beach would apply to the same requirements. Shouldn't there be some mechanism, particularly given the location of these two towns immediately adjacent to the bay, to make sure that these septic systems are properly operated and maintained?
Let me ask kind of a question in ignorance. For already existing buildings within the town, is there a sufficient sewer main availability for all of these houses, or are there sections of the town that simply don't have a sewer main within 200 feet?
There are still sections of the town that don't have that, particularly on the southwest part of town.
Okay, so we can assume that all of those folks are on septic.
We can assume that, yes, Chris.
And in the Highlands, north of town, north of 260. So those are the
Okay.
two general areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a way to compel them to self-report and maintain the inspection process within the town and not push it to the county?
It was my understanding from these casual discussions with the county that we, as the town, really had no jurisdiction over that. That was the county. Is that?
But the biannual reporting requirement is certainly something the town can enforce.
Yes.
Just like it enforces, could enforce its rental ordinance.
So what happens if a owner in the Highlands says, I've got an active sewer system or septic system here, and I don't care, I don't want to submit a report? What can the town do? They can't shut down the septic.
Yes, well, it could advise the county, make the county aware that there's a failing septic.
Right, but it's already in the ground and it's working, and
Yeah.
the county can come up, they can't cut the line to the septic. You know,
No,
what
They could
what
deny
physically can they
further
do?
occupancy of their house.
They could issue a lien on the property or put a no occupancy requirement on there for a failing septic.
No, if it's operating, if completely operating system.
Properly.
I'm a property owner in the Highlands, I've got a good system, it's working fine. Somebody knocks on my door and says, you have to file a biannual report, and they say, goodbye, I don't want to talk to you. There's nothing the town can do at that point.
No, there is not.
Okay,
So when,
Not that I'm aware of.
when you say unlawful, there is no
remedy.
remedy,
No remedy.
no penalty
Not from the town's
prescribed as what that unlawful act,
Well, unlawful is going back to 7.5, and that's the new systems. And yes, we do have jurisdiction over that as part of the building permit process.
it says or maintain in 7.5, which I assume means existing system.
It does, but that's a little tenuous as to what the town's jurisdiction would be over that.
Okay.
That would actually fall more under 7.6 now, which this biannual report is a new sentence in there. That wasn't there before.
Is a biannual standard for testing or checking or validating septic systems kind of the national standard or the state standard?
Practices.
Huh?
The best practice.
Best practice?
It varies. I looked into that a little bit, and you can find almost any number you would like to find in that, including none, which is what our old manual has, no requirement for that. I suggested the biannual just because I thought annual was a little onerous. Making any longer than that, things could go bad real quickly if they don't properly maintain, particularly the sewer systems. Now, let's not forget that there's a similar section here under the on-site public, private water systems. It's important that people check the quality of that water, particularly if you're on a shallow well. Those are more prone to contamination than deep wells, but most homeowners will only put in a shallow well for their property. In fact, one of the things the town is working on right now at Naval Research Lab is some contamination that occurred down at NRL as some of their activities that may have contaminated some shallow aquifers. It does not appear any of that has contaminated anyone's well, but it did apparently work its way into one of the shallow aquifers. So they're looking into that too.
How much money for hookup has been estimated? You have like a roundabout figure if we're going to compel people to hook up, what they would be paying?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me,
Appendix A.
Okay.
there is, Appendix A has a number of those fees in there. There's an administrative water and sewer application fee of $200. The other connection fees depend on the water connection, capital contribution charges, and the water and sewer rates. So it depends on what you're hooking up. If you're hooking up a single family residence, 2 bedrooms, 3 people, it's one number. I don't know what the number is offhand, but if you're building a 6-unit rental unit, it's going to be much more. Sorry.
20,000 or
Yeah.
15,000?
Yeah.
Trying to find which section is like the hookup fees. Connection fees right here. So
Tap fees are on the last page of that.
So that's not very much. I don't think that's too much to expect. It's not like we're
And again,
burdening somebody with thousands of dollars.
there's also a requirement in there that those connections need to be done by a certified plumber, master plumber.
Okay, and that fee would fall on them,
Yes,
which would be
yes.
probably a little bit more expensive.
Right. Yep, go ahead.
Do we have a round number of what we expect this annual plumber's inspection, master plumber's inspection would cost?
Right now, we don't have a whole lot of building permits coming up. The Heritage is probably the biggest one. There's 70 units in there, is that right?
72.
72 units going into the Heritage out there on 260. But other than that,
Will they be on city sewer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
as you drive around town, you don't see a whole lot of,
yeah, what I'm thinking more of is the people that are on septic systems that have to start paying for a plumber to come out twice a year to inspect their septic system and
every 2
report.
years, biannual, every 2 years. Not twice a year, every 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, even then.
Yeah,
don't
I
think
understand. Just wanna
how
be
much,
clear.
we're asking the public to start paying for a single family home.
Just a couple more things I wanted to bring to your attention. I already brought up the one on the private septic system submitting their regular inspection reports. The only other one that I wanted to share with you is we had, again, a lengthy discussion. As you know, we've got a lot of different situations here in town involving HOAs, homeowner associations. And what we realize is we have a number of different situations on the location of public water and sewer, sometimes on HOA property. We're going to try to identify all that and straighten it all out. And as we started to dig into it, we realized that there were just too many different variations of that. For instance, I live in Seagate. My water meter is inside my unit. I have a utility closet, and that's where the water meter is. Fortunately, we've gone to the remote reading, so that makes it a whole lot simpler. But in the past, it was difficult because someone actually had to arrange to come in and read the meter on a regular basis. In other communities, particularly Richfield Station, we've got some public water and sewer that's under HOA property. And the question was, well, how does the town get access if there is an emergency? What we have agreed to do for now, since there were just too many different variations of that situation, is we are going to handle those instances as emergencies. And there is a section in here that says if there's an emergency, the town can come in and fix it. And then we'll sort it out later. But we just were unable to sort out all the different variations between Richfield Station, Chesapeake Station, Chesapeake Village, even my little place of Seagate, to make it a simple, clear, all-encompassing statement. So if there is a water and sewer emergency on, quote, private property, be it HOA or a individual owner's property, that will be handled as an emergency by the town, and we can come in and fix it or shut it off or whatever we need to do to address the problem.
Doesn't the town's public sewer until to the extent it go up until the property
Yes.
line of an individual user, isn't there an easement over the property where the publicly owned sewer lines are? Doesn't the public have
As
an
we looked
easement?
into this, Larry, no, not in every instance. There is not.
I
Yes.
represented a community water system that had to turn off the water. The turnoff valve was on private property. We were guilty of trespass when we went in to cut off the water for non-payment because we entered the property to cut it off.
It's an unfortunate circumstance of our past that we as a town may not have been quite as rigorous in looking at that stuff. And now we're sort of stuck with it.
Well, taking into account new construction, are we
We are-
requiring an easement
Yes,
for the public sewer lines?
yes, we are.
I know that's the case in Holland Point where
Yeah,
I have
we're
some
not-
property and you have
Hopefully
to
we're
have,
not-
you had to have an easement to get hooked up to the county sewer line.
We're not hopefully perpetuating that problem anymore, but we're stuck with it now. Those are the highlights, folks. If you got any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I'm not quite sure what the timeline's going to be here now. I only recently became aware that we needed to come to talk to you folks about this.
Councilman, I do have one question.
Yeah.
I don't know whether this is in the old manual and changed in the new manual. It's dealing with the cutoff process for non-payment. I can envision a situation where you have a landlord and tenant situation where the water bill is in the name of the landlord who does not pay. And as I recall, you can come in and after a certain period of time and cut that off, tenant having no knowledge that it is not paid. Would it be appropriate to add in there a section that prior to cutoff that a public notice be posted on the property so the tenant would be aware of that?
Fine.
Let me see if I can find that.
I understand the point. It's a good point. And I'm trying to remember how we address that.
I think it came to my mind, let's see, under section 1.4.
No, but that's a good point. We may want to talk about adding something in there that addresses those.
I think just,
Units.
a 10-day notice prior to cutoff being posted on the property or something similar to that.
Chris, are you aware, would the town have a record of who are tenants in a rental property?
Doesn't
You're supposed to have a registry now.
Yeah.
Doesn't this
Adopted
say-
rental registry law, so it's I think it's being formulated as we speak.
Doesn't this say that the town administrator shall give at least 15 days notice in writing to when effect payment is due.
To the
Yes,
owner.
but as
But I'm saying if,
Mr. Gray pointed out, that would be to the owner. And if the owner is renting it out, he or she may not provide that same warning.
yeah, I would just like to protect the tenant somehow by posting something so they would be aware of a delinquent bill. Water bill or sewer bill, whatever. Yeah, but that doesn't, that's not in here. That might be the practice, but it's not in the code.
Well, and having had some experience with that, with the door hangers, I think that's a really good idea and we ought to continue it. But when it comes time and they get up in the morning to turn their water on, and it's not there, we're going to hear a lot of people say, well, I never got any door knocks.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. So something, more formal would be a good idea.
Right. I think that was the only other question that jumped out at me.
My question is, we're working on the comprehensive plan for the town. And it's my understanding that septic systems particularly are susceptible or vulnerable to sea level rise. And we've talked a lot about that in this forum. Do you have any, as an expert on this area, do you have any thoughts about any concerns we should have about areas up the street here by Fishing Creek that are on septic systems? Are they vulnerable?
Yes.
They are.
Yes.
So in our work on the comprehensive plan, we should be suggesting, my words, not the commission's words, but we should be suggesting that we address getting these areas, at least the low-lying areas that are susceptible to sea level rise, getting them on city sewer.
In my opinion,
And-
that's one of those compelling environmental reasons for extending public water and sewer is failing septic. Why is it failing? It could be just what you described, the leach field's underwater for 9 months out of the year. It won't work. And consequently, not only is it not working, now you're contaminating the water from the discharge from the septic system. That would be, in my opinion, a compelling reason to consider extending public water and sewer. Same thing has to do with private wells from sea level rise, contaminating the aquifer that they're tapping into.
The costs of connecting running sewer lines out to some of these remote areas is the town's responsibility. Is that right?
Yes, recovered through capital contribution charges over a long period of time, but yes.
Is there any way, or have you thought about or looked into any grants or other?
That's a bonded. The town
Yeah.
would float bonds for those.
And yes, bonds and grants. MDE is Maryland Department of the Environment does have a program to help communities address those kinds of situations. If you can make a compelling case that, look, due to sea level rise, whatever, these are failing or are going to fail, there's a possibility for some grant assistance from the state to help with extending the public water and sewer.
I would guess the more specific and more compelling the case is made, the better chance you get a grant.
Yes. Yeah. And it helps if it's in the area of Mike Miller's house.
Yeah. Senator Mike Miller's house. But, and that's another reason why it should be part of the comprehensive plan.
Yes.
Because that helps build the case for grants or from MDE.
And I think, as I know from talking with Chris about the comp plan, we're looking forward at that very situation on climate change. I just finished a class on becoming a certified climate change official, looking at those kinds of issues that we need to be looking down that road. And that's what comp plans are intended to do, right? They don't look at necessarily today, they're looking 10, 15 years down the road. What are things going to be like then? And beginning to do the planning associated with addressing those so that it's not a waking up one morning and go, holy, we got a problem. But look at it ahead of time.
Well, certainly the septic systems in the low-lying areas around Fishing Creek, I would guess, are the most susceptible, and the ones on the north end of town aren't because they're up at a higher level. Somehow, we need to figure out just how large the area, or how much of a threat or problem we have, so that we can put as much specificity into the comp plan so that we can build that case, I would think.
Yeah, there are projections of that available to show.
We do show the encroaching sea level rise and the encroaching expansion of the floodplain, so we can intuit where
And we
areas
could,
of concern are.
and we could show how many homes are out there. We don't know how many septic systems are out there apparently, but the more we could do that.
I think, Larry, it's fairly easy to deduce that when you look at these profiles of the potential increased water levels, and then overlay that with the town's public water and sewer systems. If there is no line there, there's no sewer there. So they must be on septic.
Yeah, well, we know who's on city sewer and city
do.
water, so
Right.
the other homes
Have to
presumably
be.
must be,
Yeah.
Unless they have an outhouse.
It's even worse.
But that whole concern extends not only to individual wells and septics, but also to sea level rise affecting the existing
Yes.
sewer mains and lines, and that would be a huge dollar cost to the town if these lines eventually are underwater. And
you
we
have
would
to
have to
replace-
relocate or do something
Yes.
to avoid having underwater lines.
Yes. Anything else?
Oh, that's all I have.
Well,
Or
thanks
anything
again
else?
for coming out.
Um,
We'll be able to get you home in time for the Nats games. Laura, did you have the last one?
No, I think
Okay.
that, it's time to start thinking about these things, and I appreciate you
Yeah.
enlightening us and doing so much work on this, making it easy to read.
Good.
Thank you.
Glad I could help.
Okay.
What you do going forward, I don't know.
All we can do is raise the red flag to the council.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. I think the only other thing that we've been communicating about, and Chris sent out a email a day or so ago, was the issue about Beach Elementary. Is any further information on that?
No, although thank you for connecting me to the capital improvements plan at the school
Right.
board. I saw that, and
I sent you a wrong section of that. The
Oh.
total projected cost of what Beach Elementary is currently doing a feasibility study to either replace on-site or to locate a new site. But we're talking nearly $33 million project. And just from my experience on the Board of Education, when we're talking about trying to preserve the tennis courts, which I think is a laudable concern, the IAC, the major funding portion for school construction, only pays for certain elements of any school project. And for an elementary school, I'm fairly confident that they do not pay for sports facilities or extraneous sports facilities such as tennis courts. So that if something has to be relocated on the beach campus, the current beach campus, that would be a cost to the town or the county to do something like that.
So
But it is a huge project. It's nearly a $33 million project if they're going to keep that campus.
So you're suggesting that if and this hypothetically, this were a high school, tennis courts might be
IAC
includable.
might fund those for a high
But
school.
for an
but not-
elementary school, it's
My experience is that they do not fund those for elementary schools. I tried to find the history of Beach as to who bore the cost of putting the tennis courts in. And I suspect that it was a county cost, a local cost, not an IAC cost, but I could not verify that. So I think it's a laudable goal that we want to keep that recreational facility. The question is, physically, can they fit all that within the boundaries of the current campus with the new school? And secondly, if they have to relocate them or do anything, who's going to pay for it?
Right. So I think Cindy's idea was good, that we just express if that is what the council and the planning and zoning committee decides.
Yeah.
And Dr. Schisler also should weigh in. I know he uses them. Whether he likes to use them, I don't know. But I know that the school children do use them.
Mm-hmm.
And so do other people. So, I mean.
Well, we have to take that up with a full quorum in order to get a
Sure,
town
sure.
commission
That's
to do that.
right. Yeah. I'm
I
not
just
asking for a
wondered-
decision. I'm just pointing out that I think too many times on some certain projects, we want to give up before we need to give up,
Mhm.
or dumb them down before we need to give.
Well,
dumb
I
them
do know
down.
that when I was working on the board and doing school constructions for other schools, there was close coordination between the school board and the local jurisdiction. So there has been a pattern of communication on these types of issues in the past.
So something
Okay.
to think about.
Right. Since we don't have anybody wants anything else while you're here? We can't formally adjourn since we didn't
I
formally
have one more
convene.
question.
Yeah.
Chris, have you talked to Melissa yet?
No, I haven't, except for email, coordinating.
Okay. Curious. I'm excited for that update from the two of you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman. All
Thank you.
right. Not if you're in record time tonight.
Well, yeah. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, nice presentation.